Hi, my name is Jonathan Hopkins. This is 10-Minute Go, where I teach you a little bit about the game of Go in under 10 minutes with the clock starting right now. Today's topic is the end of the game, Endgame. Alright, so when you've already pretty much got the corners and the sides mapped out between both players, you're going to be playing at the edge of the board, and it's really important that you don't mess up in the endgame. There is nothing worse, absolutely nothing worse, than being ahead by 10 or 15 points all throughout the entire game. You're just leading and leading and leading, and then at the end of the game, you mess up and you lose dozens of points and you lose. So it's really important, as a beginner especially, to play the end game carefully and make certain you're not making like basic mistakes. All right, so let me make clear what I mean by end game. Here's a very peaceful game. All right, and so if you look at it this way, we've got black on the right side and white on the left side. Okay, cool. And the top side is divided. The white gets most of this top side, and then the black gets this part, but the bottom side, black gets most of it, and white comes up to here. So you can think of the borders of the frameworks of each person's territory, something to this effect. Okay, so we can think of the borders, the country, the land that each player has taken, something along these lines. All right, so now really the only place left is at the top and the bottom. It's really dangerous to try for white to try to play somewhere in this area, mainly because it's going to be very difficult to make two eyes. I mean, if white plays anything, he will be squeezed of liberties, and when you're squeezed of liberties, you will find it's very difficult to live. All right. So some people say, well, are you sure it's impossible? I'm pretty sure it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to make an invasion like this. So I'm going to say that this part of black's here is territory. But that's fine, because we can start playing on the sides, at the edges of the board. All right, so for example, f8. f8 is threatening black's upper side, and this is an extremely big move, especially for the end game. Black should block, and then white can start playing moves like this. And then you have the end game, where you're going to seal off the unfinished sides. So wherever there's still a possibility of making territory or reducing your opponents. So usually in the end game, you're going to push your opponent back and make your area bigger. Now there's some specific examples I want to go over. All right, let's say you have a game like this. All right, I made these very, very simple, just to illustrate my point. All right, the bottom part here is unfinished. Let's say white hanes here. All right, white bends around this way. All right, black's territory is all in this area. This is all black's area, so we need to defend it. We don't want white coming in. How should we do that? Well, black can Atari. Okay, E1 has only one liberty left. All right, so make sure at the beginning that you're counting liberties. E1 has only one liberty left. It is an Atari. If white plays somewhere else, black will capture the stone. So that's not a good idea. So white will defend this stone. Now E1 is connected with D1, and by extension it's connected with all these stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 liberties. Now here's the catch. A lot of people will just move on from this point, but that's not a good idea. Pause the video, and where should white play if black plays somewhere else? Okay, if black plays somewhere else, like who knows, wherever he decides to play, white will cut, and this is a ladder. If white cuts to F2, then F1 only has one liberty. Okay, the F1 stone only has one liberty at G1, which means that black will have to extend his liberties. But if you remember the ladder trap, then it looks like there's absolutely no escape for black. No matter where he goes, he always has this one liberty left, and then when black extends to J1, he still only has one liberty, and it's white's turn, which means that white will, bam, take everything. So basically, once white plays this point, F1 is dead, and all this territory around G2, H2, this territory becomes really difficult to defend. All right, this is a horrible loss for black. So what black should do, instead of playing elsewhere, is simply defend. Connect F1 with the other stones by playing at F2, and now black has a ton of liberties, and there's no way he's going to be put into Atari. Okay, so in shapes like these, it's really good to get for white to get E1, Atari, connect, connect. Okay, you could do a hanging connection, tiger's mouth like this. All right, which there's a small difference, but not for your level, doesn't really matter. Okay, just kind of remember that sequence. Here's another. All right, so I want to introduce you to two new terms which you may not have been using so much. I've been trying not to use them so much. I try not to use Japanese terms as much as possible. I like to use English terms, but for these ones, I'm going to have to use Japanese. The first one is sente. Okay, sente is initiative. Okay, so when you have sente, it means you have the initiative to decide what's going to happen. Or A move is sente when your opponent must defend against it. Okay, I play a sente move means you must respond to me or there will be negative consequences. Okay, you don't have to, you never really have to respond to your opponent, but if you don't, they have a threat behind their move. If you don't do this, I will do this. So for example, okay, let's take black. Black d9 is sente. Okay, black d9 is sente. If white does not play in this area, black will destroy all this territory in the upper left. So white wants to defend it. Okay, so white will not pass. White will Atari, connect, connect, just like the shape we just learned about. Now look at the difference though. Let's say it's white's turn. Okay, let's say it's white's turn. When white plays at e9, okay, black blocks, then white blocks. Now whose turn is it? It's black's. Okay, so at the very end of the sequence. So if we look here, there's a big difference. If black gets to play here first, oops, let me go back. Black plays here is sente, connect, connect, and now it's black's turn. Whereas when white played at e9, which is very big, Atari, connect, now it's black's turn. Alright, so when in the end game, you have to think about, well, when I play this, will it end on my turn or will it end on their turn? If it ends on your turn, it's sente. If it ends on their turn, it's gote. Okay, gote is the opposite of sente, where you have to, where it's like you lack initiative. Alright, two more examples. Here's another big endgame shape. Alright, so one big thing is a lot of people make mistakes with this. Alright, let's say it's black's turn. Black plays e9 to reduce the f8 stones to 2 liberties. Alright, they have 2 liberties. 1, 2. One huge mistake that beginners like to make is blocking here. This seems like a completely reasonable move, and I understand if you're a beginner and you play this, but it's wrong. Okay, in your mind, maybe you think that black will play d9, white will play g8, and then everything will be well. No. Okay, pause the video and think about it. Where is black's excellent move to play here? Black will cut at g8. Okay, once black cuts at g8, white has 1 liberty left at the top. And okay, well, I can just take a stone, Jonathan. Yes, you can, but then I will Atari you at g9. You have 1 liberty left. If you connect, you still only have 1 liberty left. I will capture everything. Alright? I will play this sequence again. Okay? So, I hane. Okay, bend around. If you block, this is incorrect. I will Atari. You take. I Atari. You connect. I take everything. The correct move for here would be to simply connect. Okay, at g8 to get all your liberties together. You don't have the power to play f9. Okay, so another big mistake people do is if it's white's turn. This looks like a big move, but when black Ataris, you can't connect at e9. Do you see a problem here? If black cuts at g8, then white is caught in a ladder. White tries to play this, white is all dead. Alright, play this out to yourself several times so you make sure you don't make these mistakes, alright? So if it's black's turn, okay, if it's white's turn, probably the best move will be something to this effect. Something like this, alright? Or just simply blocking, okay? But if you're black, this is a great move, and all the thing white can do is block, okay? This also works in some cases, but just simply blocking. Definitely not turning. Okay, last thing I'm going to go over is for you to kind of understand another shape that people make a mistake with. These 2 stones lack liberties. Let me mark the stones at A. These 2 stones lack liberties. They only have 3 liberties. Okay, so let's say it's black's turn. When black hanes here, white cannot Atari back. Alright, pause the video and think about why. Okay, here, if black connects and white connects, then we're all living happily ever after. But black is not going to do that. Black is going to cut. He's going to sacrifice the stone at f1. I bet you're saying to yourself, well, I'll just take your stone, whatever. Okay, Atari. 1 liberty left to f1. You connect. Ladder. You cannot escape. Okay, play it back to yourself when you review this so you memorize this shape, because this shape is extremely important. That means white cannot Atari here. White has to play something like this, or similar to play the triangle like this. Now, white's liberties are okay. I push into g1, Atari at h1, I block, you block. If you don't block, I double Atari you, and, well, that's pretty bad. It's really important you know these shapes, alright, for endgame, because if you know these shapes and your opponent doesn't, they make a mistake, you can punish them in the endgame, and if it's the endgame, there is absolutely no way they can make it up. Alright, I hope you're enjoying 10 Minute Go, and I'll see you next time.